Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Kelly Palmer.
And I'm Kayla David.
Welcome to Be Well Live. Kayla and I are part of the healing department at Family Service of Rhode Island, and we gather together every other week on Wednesdays as part of our Be Well Live information series, where we talk about a variety of things related to wellness and coping, especially during COVID 19. For those of you who don't know, Family Service of Rhode Island is a social service agency, and we offer a variety of programs, including telehealth counseling.
So please, we ask you every week, and if you're new with us, we might be asking you for the first time, to take a moment to share this with your friends or to start a watch party. We really want to reach as many people as we can to share this information about being well during COVID-19 and beyond. We know that now more than ever, it's so important to be able to reach out if you're struggling, to get help from your loved ones or to get help for your loved ones. So, if you are struggling during COVID-19, please know that this is a very, normal experience, that there's so much stress right now, that COVID-19 is impacting our mental health, our overall well-being. And if you are in need of assistance or someone you know is in need of assistance, please reach out to us at Family Service of Rhode Island.
So, Kayla, I'm really excited about our topic and
Me
our
too.
guest today. Yay. So, today our topic is conquering your remote workplace. So, we just want to start off by saying and acknowledging that we know that there are many, many people out there who don't actually have the luxury of working from home right now, or who have even lost their jobs as a result of this pandemic. There's many workers and people putting their families and themselves at risk every day. Healthcare workers, people working in grocery stores, and we really want to acknowledge that and thank you for doing that. Um, and so many people are struggling right now, but for even those fortunate enough to be able to continue working and to continue working from the safety of their own homes, remote work is really posing many new challenges and stresses. And we've heard from several of our viewers that they're having struggles with working from home. So, and that they're looking for some help. So that's what kind of brought us to our topic today.
Yes, Sarah. And we know that millions of employees around the world, they join the remote workforce nearly overnight. I know at FSRI, our transition was extremely fast, and and I've talked to so many other people the same way. I talked to teachers that said all of a sudden, we left on a Friday and we didn't know we weren't coming back. We didn't know we'd be in person. That's the same for so many other people. So we know it was an extremely quick adjustment. Um, and with that, with adjusting in the midst of a crisis, we might not have had the time to kind of set up our workspace before the pandemic. Research suggested that teleworking or working from home had lots of benefits. It could increase an employee's job satisfaction, it could
Mm.
increase overall performance at work. It also helped employees feel more committed to the organization. So it improved people's work, it improved their job satisfaction, it led to decreases in turnaround. However, teleworking also has its drawbacks, and that includes social and professional isolation, decrease in information sharing and opportunities to share information, and difficulty. Well, I think one of the biggest ones for people who've kind of navigated in really quickly to adjust to the COVID-19 crisis is the difficulty separating work and personal time.
So today we have help to talk about this. We are joined by a special guest, Leslie Huikko. Leslie is a certified professional organizer who also has a master's degree in social work. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Leslie.
Um, in her work and her role as a certified professional organizer, Leslie helps people who are feeling stuck find new ways to use their space as well as their time. So, as she says, they can show up in the world the way that they want. She is a helper by nature, and is a strong believer in people's capacity for growth and ability to change. So we're so glad to have you here with us today, Leslie.
Thank you,
You're
Kayla.
here. You're welcome. So Leslie's going to help us work through some of the challenges of remote working that Kayla talked about. So everything from how to physically set up your work area to some tips on establishing boundaries between your work and personal life, and also how to deal with that maybe feeling of isolation or disconnection um, that sometimes comes with kind of telecommuting. Um, but we also wanted to let you know that working from home can actually be an opportunity, as Leslie has reminded us, to take a fresh look at where, how, and when we work.
Yes. And Leslie, this topic is one that we've heard people have emailed us about several
Yeah.
times, um,
Yep.
really saying this is something they're struggling with since beginning COVID-19. And for many people, this was the first time. I know in our profession, we never did this work from home. Or it was a luxury, or you were grant writing if you worked from home. So you just didn't, this wasn't something that we did. And for so many people prior to COVID-19, it wasn't something that they even imagined themselves doing. So many people felt that initial relief, right? I get to be safe, I get to work from home, they get to continue working because so many people had lost their jobs in the midst of COVID-19. But I think that some of that relief very quickly kind of was kind of taken over by the challenges that presented themselves around working from home. So I know it's hard to even start thinking about this topic. And when we were thinking about it, we were like, we don't even know where to start. But I thought maybe we could start with the basics. So we know that you are really thoughtful. There we go. About how you set up the physical environment, and we were hoping that you could share some tips about how to physically set up our workspaces to help to contribute to success when working remotely.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So this is actually kind of a good time to be having this conversation because people have been working from home, who are working from home, have been doing it for a while now, so they have information about what's working or not working. So it might be time for a refresh. Also, kids may or may not be going back to school, so it might change some things from that perspective too. So this is actually a really good time to sort of take stock of what's working and not working. Um, and so if you have a space set up already and it's not working, I think the first thing I would recommend is just take everything out of it, um, and just start fresh, because honestly, less is more in a workspace because you can be more focused and you don't need as much space and there aren't as many distractions. So then you can just add back in what you need as you need it. And then you don't have anything extra in there. That's not to say you might not want, photos or plants or something to fidget with, something that makes it easier for you to work or stay focused. But just make sure that everything that's in there is intentional and it's a reason for being there. Um, and then another tip that I think has worked really well for folks is to try to think about your workspace. If you had an office before and you shifted it home, think about what worked for you in your workspace at work. So if you had, for instance, if you had two monitors on your desk at work because you needed to have things open on more than one tab regularly, then try to do that at home. Um, Try to have a bulletin board if you're used to having things handy, information you use all the time. If you use a folder to capture information to discuss with somebody at a later time, do that at home as well. This does not have to be expensive either. I know that there are some employers who are actually allowing people to go back into their offices and either get their desk chair, because a comfy chair is important for your health, physical health, um, or going in and getting another monitor, get your monitor from work and bring it home rather than having to go out and buy one, things like that. Um, and then I always like to remind people that the little details are the ones that make the difference. So things like if you're left-handed, keep the stuff that you use all the time, that you reach for all the time on your desk, on the left-hand side of it. That's one of those things that people, it's kind of a no-brainer when you say it out loud, but when you think about how many times you're reaching across your desk to get something, yeah, you'd be surprised how often you can simplify your experience at your desk just by moving things to a different location on your desk.
I literally think I that Yeah, so I'm totally changing my desk after this. Sorry.
We can stop this now.
Brilliant.
I've already learned so much.
Oh my gosh.
So, Leslie, one of the things that can be really hard is if you don't have a separate room to have as an office. So, I know, for me, my offices also are now not used guest bedroom. For other people, they're saying they're taking pockets of the end of a hallway, or they're in a really open space.
Yep.
What are some of the specific tips for small spaces, shared spaces, open spaces?
Yeah. So realistically, I think that's what most of us are doing.
Mm.
Because even if you have an office at your house, you probably have more than one person who needs to use that office. So, um, what I like to remind people in this situation is that you do not need a ton of space, right?
Mm.
You need a work surface, and you need a space where you can do things like this, have video calls, in a way that you have at least a semi-professional background that's not distracting, at least, right? And so the thing that was life changing, actually for me personally, was learning that those don't have to be the same place. You can do
Oh.
your calls somewhere different than where you do your work. Um, because for me, like right now, I'm in the corner of our living room, which is the most frequently used room in this house. And so there's no way I could be in here all the time and focusing on what I'm trying to do. But when I'm doing video calls, it's got a lot of natural light and I'm comfortable in here and I like being in here. So I just have a little corner where I set up my workstation when I'm doing video calls. But if I'm working on something that requires concentration or I want to leave it out and not look at it when I'm done working on it until I come back to it again, I do that in a different part of the house. So separating out what tasks you do where can be super life changing.
That I love that also, Leslie. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been
Um,
doing everything in one. like I I've been doing it's a luxury if I move to another place, but I do think like that also does so much for your mind, right? Of like that walk or that movement, you get the creative juices flowing even if you're in another space.
Yeah,
well,
exactly. Well, another thing to think about that is, um, if you want to be able to see your stuff when you're not working. So that's, I think, a challenge of sometimes working in more like shared spaces in your home is you might not necessarily, I mean, you might need to do your work in a shared space and it might be the dining room table and you need to clear it off to be able to have dinner that night. So I think it's really important. That goes back to the less is more thing, like only have out what you need to have out. But also the stuff that you have that you need to work with, make sure you can pretty easily get that gathered back up, and put away and then get it back out again. So I have a little show and tell, if that's
oh
okay.
yes,
Um,
yes.
so this little guy is my favorite. It's
Oh.
really just a little file box, and I just scoop up everything that I'm working on. I mean, it's $6 and I can just fit everything that I need in there. It's got the papers I need, it's got my planner because I'm a paper girl. It's got my stapler and my writing utensils, and everything I need is in there, and I can put it in there and move it wherever I need to move it. And that's been really important for me to not have it spread out all over the place when I'm not working. Um, that is, well, we'll get to that later, but that's an important
I
component too.
love that, Leslie.
And little rolly carts, or even just
Yeah,
having a drawer or a cabinet where you can scoop things up and put it away temporarily, I think is a good plan.
I love that, Leslie.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we love show and tell, so that's awesome. Um, so 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 let's say physically setting up our environment is so important, and I think you just pointed out several things that might seem like common sense, but I have had several light bulbs go off just now. Um, but I think what also can happen when we're working remotely, and I can kind of share from firsthand experience that many of us now who have switched to working from home have actually found ourselves working more than we did when we were in an office setting. So I know that I sometimes am guilty of logging on earlier because I don't have a commute anymore, right? So that means I can actually start my workday sooner than usual, but I'm not maybe necessarily ending my workday sooner than usual.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
And I think also a lot of us are finding that these lines of, between work and home are much more blurred, and it
For
can be
sure.
harder to kind of turn it off at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So I don't know if you could talk about kind of some ways that people can structure their time to make sure they're not burning out, and also kind of like that struggle between the work and personal.
Yes.
Um,
The struggle
yeah.
is real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so you're not alone. Um, this is probably the number one question I get from people about working from home. But
Mhm.
fun fact, this is probably also the number one question I got pre-pandemic for people
Ah,
who were working from home. So this is an ongoing thing for people, and really important. So, so I'm happy to talk about it.
great.
So I do think that the flexibility in time is such a gift if we use it that way.
Okay.
So one thing to keep, you talked about your commute. So here's what I recommend about your commuting. So how long was your commute before?
It's
Let's say.
about 30 minutes, let's
Okay.
say.
So you have an extra hour in your day that you're
Uh,
not commuting. I
yeah.
challenge you to use that for something fun, something you just want to do. Because as you guys talked about in your intro, this is a crazy time. There's a lot of transition happening. Things are changing all the time. It's causing stress for people. Self-care is
Mhm.
more important now than it's ever been. And so you have this gift of time that was your commute. So use it for something you want to do, not something you need to do, not something to be more productive. You know, read a book, play an instrument, color, knit, whatever you want to do that feels good to you. Use your commute time for yourself. I think that would be, if everybody could do that, I think we'd all be in a better spot. So, and don't beat yourself up if you don't do it for a whole hour. Just
Okay.
even if you do it for your morning commute. And it doesn't have to be at your commuting times either. We're going to talk about that.
Oh, good.
So, the thing about being able to work from home is that you can work when it works for you. So, um, like if you're an early bird, you could you could conceivably have half of your workday in
Mhm.
before 9 o'clock
Mm.
every day. You know what I mean? And so, um, I think it's important to use your time when you're most focused, because if you can, so like for me personally, the early afternoon, really hard time for me to be focused.
Mhm.
So when I've been working from home, I've been trying to find something to do to mix things up in the early afternoon. I either go for a walk, or I spend some time with my kids, or I just do something that doesn't require me to be as focused and have as much brain power, because that's
Mhm.
not the time when I have the most of it. So, working with your natural inclinations about when you're most focused and when you wake up. Obviously, we all still have obligations that have to happen during the quote unquote normal work
Mhm.
hours, but the things you mentioned, grant writing, report writing, things like that, that can really happen whenever it works for you. So it can be late at night, it can be early in the morning.
Nice.
Yeah, and you can also, you made a point of saying that you were working a little bit more than usual. So I also recommend that people be very intentional about scheduling their work. I think that's where it gets blurry, because
Mhm.
when you're living and working in the same space, it's always kind of there. But if you schedule 8 hours, if your work day is 8 hours, schedule 8 blocks of time in your calendar to do work. And it might not be 8 back-to-back hours. It
Mhm.
might be, working for 3 really intensely and then breaking it up after that. It might be using the Pomodoro method. That's a method that a lot of people use to it's like a burst of focus and energy to get stuff
Oh.
done. So you work really intensely for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. That helps people who struggle with time. There's this principle that says that a task expands to take up the amount of time you allow to get it done. So if you allow yourself an
Oh.
hour to write a report, it's probably going to take you an hour. But if you give yourself a half hour and you just really try to race yourself or gamify it in some way, there's a good chance you could get it done. So I have another little
Love
show
that.
and tell here.
Yes. This is great.
Um, if you,
I'm learning so much,
I
Leslie. Thank you.
know.
oh, good, good. So this little guy is a favorite of mine. It's called a time timer.
Yes.
And so
Yep.
it gives you a visual representation of time. So like the red is the time remaining. So like right now I have it set for 30 minutes and then it'll keep counting down. So when that sits on my desk, I know just by glancing at it exactly how much time I have left. Um, and
Uh,
I play a little game of beat the clock with myself sometimes. So
well, and that's so great too. I'm such a visual person,
yeah,
and especially, having such scheduled meetings back to back, like instead of just constantly glancing at the clock like that, what a great way to show the time. Sorry.
yeah.
Really
And
excited
you
about
don't you don't have to get a
that.
gadget either. I
Yeah.
just happen to
Yeah.
love that one, but
Yeah.
colleagues do that. You can do it on
Yeah.
your computer. But just something to help you visually mark the time um, really helps, I find.
Nice.
Well, I love that idea, Leslie, and other people in our comment section do too. They're all having light bulb moments. But I love that idea of if I give myself an hour, it's going to take an hour. And,
Yeah,
and that happens to me all the time. I look at my email, I answer this, I do
yeah,
this. And so work feels like it takes forever. And then I leave the day and it doesn't feel like I know I've gotten things accomplished, but it doesn't feel like maybe I got anything off my to do list. That idea of like, you have a focused burst of energy and you give yourself a half hour or 25 minutes
mhm,
and you do nothing, you check nothing, you are just totally
yeah,
focused on that.
yep,
It to me it feels like, oh, I'm finally going to get some of those things off my to-do list and they're not overwhelming. Sometimes I look at them and I'm like, that's going to take, like, with everything going on, that's going to take all day,
yeah.
versus actually if I'm just totally completely
Mhm.
focused, it would only take this amount of time.
Exactly. Well, and you bring up another good point too, is that when you're blocking those times, when you're planning out your 8 hours a day and when you're going to work them, make a note of what you plan to work on at that time, because then other things don't encroach upon it. So if
Mhm.
you still have to check your email and be responsive and do that kind of thing, but if you have time set aside that's earmarked for a certain project, it's a lot less likely that something else is going to swoop in and take over.
Nice.
And if you have to move it, because things come up,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
have to move it, just put it on a different scheduled time.
I love that.
Leslie, I mean, thank you. There's just so much. I always thought I had to work 8 hours back to back. I mean, there's always these things that you learn from being in an office that opens and closes at certain times. That
Right.
this
Yeah.
idea of taking back those opportunities, right? There's an opportunity here, and taking that back is just so, um, like there's just like it lifts something off your shoulders the minute you said that. So,
Yeah.
um, one of the things that we're hearing, I mean, this is more of a Sarah experiences this. I don't have children, but one of the things that many people are writing into us about, especially if they have young children, is how they're struggling to establish those boundaries and those routines with
Mm,
their children, or this understanding that mommy and daddy or mom and dad are working.
mm,
Um, and that they might not be able to be engaged in the way they would if they were naturally home and not working, and that I think brings up so many feelings of maybe I'm not being a good parent or I'm not able to be responsive. And I think there's all those negative thoughts that might
Mhm.
come in the way of creating those boundaries. So when you think about that, and I know this depends on the age of the children too, what are some things or some ways to establish healthy boundaries with children when you're telecommuting, when you are working from home?
sure. Well, part of it starts with just modeling having routines. So,
Mm.
part of it is you want to have steps that you go through every day that let you know, and it doesn't have to be long and 47 steps, right? But it just needs to be something that puts you in the mindset for getting to work. And it's also a signal to everybody around you that you're getting ready to work. And it might be as simple as, um, putting on a pair of shoes because you don't have to leave the house, but maybe it's just like a reminder that, like, oh, okay, now I'm working. I'm not barefoot anymore. Or it might be that it could be that when you sit in a certain area, whatever your designated workspace is, once you sit in that area, that sends a message that you're working. Um, And so I want to talk about habits for ending the day too, but I'll leave that for a little bit later. So with kids, it's always about the same thing with kids, right? It's clear communication, it's managing expectations, and it's adding enough structure, like not crazy structure, but enough structure that they know what to expect. So this goes back to the being able to use your time more the way you might want to. So you could work for a chunk of time and then take a break and play a game with your kids or help them with homework or do whatever they need you to do, but they don't have to wait all day. And it's important that they know that. If you have either set times during the day that you take a break, that's a good thing for them to, if they're old enough to tell time. And or it's another opportunity to use the time timer. You can set that and you can put it on your desk facing them, and so they know when that goes off, they're going to be able to talk to you. So much of it you're just going to have to negotiate, like you said, based on the age and the needs of your child. But adding in a little bit of structure helps. So we have a calendar in our kitchen that's usually much more full of activity than it is right now. And right now, what we're using it for is to put things on there like video calls, because everybody, people can look at that and say, okay, I should not plan on being in the living room at that time because there's video call happening. Or if there's a set break time, you can put that on there. Or if you have a special event planned with your kids for later in the afternoon because you're taking a break for work, put that on the calendar. Then they can be a little bit more self-sufficient with knowing what's happening and you don't have to be involved. The other thing is they get an idea and they want to talk to you about it right away. Using something like a whiteboard that just gives them a place to jot down their thought or their question or whatever, gives them a place to sort of park it until you're able to give them a little bit of attention. In our house, we have the concept of roaming around the cabin. So if I'm up and about roaming around the house, that's kind of like the international sign for I'm not working at this exact moment. And if you need something, go ahead and ask. Like, you're not interrupting me if I'm up and about.
I love that.
Oh,
So,
and the other thing I was going to say one more thing about that in terms of offering structure. You can work with your kids, again, depending on age, to help them structure their day ahead of time. And so like giving them choices or giving them categories of things to do. We have different categories that we talk about in terms of things for your brain, things for your body, things for your living space, things that are nice for somebody else. And you pick something to do. You know, you might send a card to somebody, or you might vacuum. Or it makes me laugh to say that, but I like to dream. So, you know, or something for your brain like that. It could still be something fun. It could be doing a Quizlet, or it could be taking an online class or playing your instrument, like just something to engage those different parts of your needs every single day. If the kids can break it into those categories, then they can sort of structure their own day and pick things from those different categories to do without you having to micromanage it.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that we talked about a few weeks ago. Sarah had talked about these categories and the way to develop routine and structure, and it's so it empowers children to really create their own structure for their day and teaches them how to structure their day and develop a routine. It's really powerful.
And I think now and I think for families out there that maybe have been a little more unstructured, now's a really good time to kind of bring it back as we're about to embark on whatever school may look like, right? So getting kids used to that routine and rhythm again, I think is really important.
Agreed.
Yeah. So another thing we've heard a lot about, Leslie, is this idea of, so I, as you know, am a extrovert, a highly social person. And part of kind of the payoff I would get at work was not just kind of a professional, satisfaction of the job that I did, but really I would feed off of that kind of socialization with my coworkers, being able to interact with different people each day in person. And, I think that many people kind of would rely on their coworkers for that socialization, right? And would kind of feed off of it. And I think that for many of us who are now working from home, we no longer have that, right? So, and there's also kind of maybe no longer those after work get togethers or
Mm.
those things that just kind of helped us. So I think we've heard from many people that they're feeling more isolated and disconnected. And, I know we're experiencing there's much more email than there is even phone calls, or there's more texting rather than phone calls. So, I don't know if you have any advice about how people can kind of, make those meaningful connections in this kind of remote environment. Because I also do know people are getting Zoom fatigue as well. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough one. Well, you mentioned a really good one, actually. Picking up the phone is
Mm,
amazing, and it's
yeah,
totally refreshing. People don't expect you to do it. I think
that's true.
one of I think one of the things that's kind of nice about it is that it's a callback to pre-COVID time. Like people picked up the phone more when they weren't doing Zoom calls, and it's tied to what you were talking about with Zoom fatigue and all of that. Like people are just sapped at the end of the day, energy wise.
Yeah.
But when you pick up the phone, you have a different kind of connection. You're not reading people's facial
Mhm.
expressions. You're not scanning their background to see what's in it. You're not just being bombarded with so much.
Mm,
Um, and you can also do it when you take a walk. You could put self-care right in with connecting with other people. So that is a form of self-care, connecting with other people, especially for
mhm,
extroverts. But, put your headset in or your AirPods or whatever and go take a walk and talk on the phone at the same time. Um, Send a postcard with something totally not work related. If you're talking about doing this with coworkers, just say, hey, I saw this and I thought of you, or, I read this book and I know you're going to love it. Even if it's something you could easily text somebody, who doesn't love
mm,
getting a postcard in the mail,
yeah,
right? I mean, just little things. You kind of have to get creative because you have to go back to the things that they might be feel like a little bit of extra effort at first, but once you get in the habit of doing them, like anything else, it's easy to do. And it's also you could do book clubs, virtual book clubs together. You could take an online class together, something
mhm,
that you're both mutually interested in. Um, you could be accountability buddies. This is something that's been working really well for me, is to call somebody up and say, for the next hour, I'm going to be doing this. And just knowing that I need to check in with them at the end of that hour
mhm,
holds me accountable in a way that just being at home with the 500 distractions that are home, it completely changes my perspective and my ability to focus. Um, and then the other thing is just to ask people what they need. I
mm,
think we keep forgetting that. I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I forget to ask people what they need, even though I am a helper by nature and I want to offer help. I just forget to ask how I
mm.
can be helpful. So if you just remember to ask that in whatever way you can, it's going to help with connections also.
Thank you, Leslie.
Yeah, Leslie, and I mean, I think you've spoken about this a little bit because one of the things that's been really difficult when you're not, I mean, I'm sure for people also who were working from home before all of this, but that idea of collective brainstorming, right? So there's that socialization piece that really kind of fills our bucket, or that moment when you're having a really difficult time and there's someone professionally that really kind of understands that experience is in it with you. But
Mhm.
there's also that conquering of like creativity, right? Being, Sarah and I used to do this all the time. We would sit down for lunch, but all of a sudden we would have like our next grant
Mhm,
idea of
Yeah.
just like that collective brainstorm
Yep.
helps us so much in our progress in our work. Do you have any kind of thoughts or ideas of how we can create that collective spark and that
Yeah.
creativity in a virtual platform?
Yep. So you wanted, in the same way you do with your physical space, you want to think back to what worked. So in your example, you guys would get together over lunch and and ideas would come up. Schedule a Zoom lunch.
Hmm.
Um,
We haven't done that yet. Yeah.
We
haven't
haven't.
done that. Or do it, you can also do it over the phone. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't, but just schedule the time to talk and just have it be unstructured time. So it sounds sort of counterintuitive, right? Like, schedule time to be unstructured, but you kind of need to do that. You have to get creative in order to be creative, especially if you're somebody who feeds off energy from other people, and a lot of creative people do. Um, so you can even, if you're trying to think of solutions company wide, I know a lot of people have scheduled water cooler Zooms or break room Zooms.
Oh.
And so it's a place where you can just sort of drop in and talk about whatever's on your mind. And it doesn't have to be work related, just, if you would have popped in the break room and talked about something, that's an opportunity to do that. Or
I love that.
having a place where people can capture ideas that they just know that it exists. So maybe it's um, a shared Google document that lives on your drive, and you just
Mm.
it's the idea page, or the next big idea, or what, give it a fun name, something that's going to draw people there, and also so when they see it, it kind of gets them excited and thinking differently. Um, and then also keep in mind that people, when they are trying to be creative, they engage in different ways. So if people are more visual folks, when you're having meetings, you might want to have somebody, maybe instead of having their face in front of their camera, they might want to have a whiteboard or a flip chart,
Mhm.
or something that lets people see the thoughts that are coming out and what's being discussed in the meeting, so that their brain can make the connections in the way that they normally would. Or maybe using your chat feature a little bit differently, and then maybe emailing out the chat conversation, because you can do that. Not everybody knows you can do that. And a lot of times there's good nuggets in that, and good ideas that happen and are recorded in the chat. So um, hope that
Yeah.
answers your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, we have like a Zoom-like platform that we use at our organization, and it has a whiteboard, and I've never used it, but I've seen it, like, oh, I could share a whiteboard.
Yeah.
And that, I'm just thinking, like, how many opportunities would it have? How many past opportunities were there to use that whiteboard where it might have really inspired more kind of collective creativity? I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, people sometimes just need to see things to engage their brain in a different way.
Yeah, and I love the idea, Leslie, of scheduling that unstructured time, because I think we have been so hyper focused on, and really just specific about our meetings, that we have lost that kind of things that come up at the water cooler, or you know what I mean, when you're having lunch. So I love that idea. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to circle back to so you had mentioned this idea of how to kind of wrap up your day.
Mm.
So I'm really curious if you have tips about that. Like, what's the best way for us to kind of wrap up the day so that we don't kind of blur into our personal life with work?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So you're going to love this,
Yeah.
Sarah, because
Okay,
I
good.
know how you feel about Mr. Rogers.
Yes, I love Mr. Rogers.
You love Mr.
I
Rogers.
do.
So think about him. He came in the door, he took off his jacket, he put on his sweater, he changed his shoes. Find some sort of ritual for yourself that
Mm,
really just sort of puts a bookend at the end of your day. So, um, like I said before, if you're in a shared space, if you're working in the middle of a room, use that time to pack it up. And when I'm talking about it, it should not take more than a couple minutes to pack up what you have, or you shouldn't be packing it up, because you'll spend your whole time going back and forth doing that. But you could spend some time sort of planning what you're going to do tomorrow. You could end your day a little earlier than you planned, and spend 10 or 15 minutes just doing what we talked about, of knowing what you're going to work on your different blocks of time for tomorrow.
mm-hmm.
Maybe you pack up your stuff and you go for a walk, or you walk the dog, or um, that when you walk away from this, you start a load of laundry. Like, you just stack one habit on top of another habit, and
Mm-hmm.
then that starts to sort of signal to your brain, okay, I'm done. I don't have to come back to this until tomorrow, because in most cases, it's not an emergency. It will be there tomorrow. You can save it for tomorrow. But the beauty of having more control over your time is that if you're really in a groove at the end of your day and you think you can knock out the end of a project or a report or something, work an hour later and then give yourself that grace
Mhm.
tomorrow to
Mhm.
work an hour less.
Yep.
So just be clear about how you're ending your day so that it's the same every day and you know what to expect. And you're just, some people actually are doing mini commutes. Um, so in the morning, they might get dressed, shower, get dressed, eat breakfast, do everything, and then actually physically get in their car and just drive around the block, because that's their mindset. Like, oh, now I'm working. And
Right.
they do that same thing at the end of the day. They
Ah,
just
that's
they
cool.
pack everything up, they get in their car, they drive around a little bit. It's the same as their commute, where they would sort of work out, wrap up
Mhm.
things mentally, and then come back home. And when the garage door comes up, you're home.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that, Leslie. I think people are getting really creative about ways to end their day. And I do think that ritual is just so, so important.
Yeah.
Of like just shutting things down, because we would have those rituals naturally for people that didn't work from home before this. The building would naturally close, or your colleague would come in and
Mhm.
be like, "You've been here an
Oh,
hour
wow.
too long. Let's go. Like, pack up your stuff." And we might not
Right.
have that. Sometimes we do, like every once in a while, I'll get something from someone and they're like, "Are you still working? Like, why are you emailing me? It's like time to shut things down." But we don't have that same natural,
Yeah.
those natural boundaries or bookends to the day. So that idea of being really creative with it, because our brains need it. We need to be able to shut it
Yes,
down.
they do.
Mm.
And that's another way you can engage with coworkers. You can be each other's accountability about shutting down for the day and just say, I'm walking away. You need to walk away too. Like, this is
Mhm.
the equivalent of me walking past your office and dragging you to the parking lot with me.
I love
That's
that.
great. Yeah.
Well,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh, sorry, Sarah. Go on.
No, I was just gonna say, so, I mean, Leslie, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you think we should? You have just shared so many, I think, helpful tricks and hints. I know that I've made up my own list over here about what I'm going to be working on. But is there anything else you wanna share with us that we haven't covered?
No, you guys had really good
Oh, good.
questions.
Good.
I just want to say, I feel like, just don't be afraid to keep experimenting with things, because everything keeps evolving, and something that's working for you now might stop working for you. And just treat it like an experiment. Change things up when you need to change things up. Be patient with yourself. You didn't just change physical locations for work.
Mm,
There's a lot more that's taking up brain space for us right now. There's a ton more decisions. Decision fatigue is real. There's a lot of worries and stresses, and attention is fractured. So just be kind, be patient with yourself and with everybody else.
Well, Leslie, thank you so, so much. This has been like truly so helpful. And we appreciate you taking your time with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And
yay.
you can find Leslie at her website, lesliehuikko.com. And I'm going to spell it out for everyone because Leslie's last name is spelled a little differently than it sounds. So her last name is Huikko. So I think our lovely producer will put it hopefully at the bottom of the screen so that people can click on it. But thank you, and we hope that people do reach out to you, because this has been, I mean, truly life changing. I feel like I'm going to change my space today. So thank you. And for everyone out there, thank you for watching. And please remember to tune in 2 weeks, where we conquer another topic related to wellness during COVID-19. So thank you all, and be safe and be well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Leslie.